What I'm doing. This is a very improvisational video, spontaneous. So this is a bit different. I have welcome to my cave. It's not a man cave. It's the Tanis cave. It's my cave. It's where I spend a good deal of my time. It's my room in my parents' house where I live currently. And so I'm thinking through some things, and I want to talk about. So I got my handy dandy little whiteboard. Two things. Let's do through hiking. If you have no idea what that means, that's perfect. I think that's what this video is about. I think. Okay. It's gonna be through hiking versus, and because so through hiking versus, and so if you didn't like, versus is like two things against each other, so, or in comparison with each other. That's what this is, compare and contrast kind of. Through hiking versus backpacking. So this is a purely spontaneous video, so I haven't really thought through how to do this. So start with through hiking. I guess for me, so I've been on a through hike. It was approximately 6 days in March to April 2013 on the island of Maui in the Hawaiian Islands. And I guess for me, through hiking, so you have a trail or a path in mind, and the goal, whether you achieve it or not, I think this is a big one, is to finish the trail. And so I think there's a lot, some people use it as kind of like, oh, I have to finish the trail to have through hiked it. But you still, if you don't make it to the end point, you still through hike a portion of it, of a trail. So that's still technically through hiking. It might not be through hiking the entire trail. We did make it to our destination. So we through hiked our entire trail. We did hitchhike part of the trail, which is pretty common even for longer trails of the Pacific Crest Trail, stuff like that. People will go get more food supplies like that, and they don't always walk into town. A lot of the times they hitchhike. So if you wanted to play devil's advocate, well, it's not like they're walking every single step of the way. They do get rides and stuff like that. So continuous footsteps, I'd say. It might have been that way in the past, like every single thing is a footstep, but I think that's not necessarily the case these days. A lot of people will get rides and stuff like that. So for me, and there's a very much with a through hike, the through hiking, this is a through hike mentality versus backpacking is a little more inclusive. Like you don't have to be geared into just one mindset of I'm through hiking this trail or attempting to through hike this trail. Yes, I'm speaking like it can be kind of too much, I think, the through hiking mindset sometimes, both from my own personal experience and interacting with those who are kind of like die-hard through hikers. But everybody, the world operates because we do have extremes. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just, it's a lot. And what else about through hiking? Oh, it doesn't have to be with a backpack. So that's probably the biggest difference I would put. Doesn't have to be a backpack. So let's say it's a 6-day hike. How am I going to carry my supplies and stuff like that? So my pack was like about 50 pounds when I did it. So I did use a backpack on my through hike. Not everybody does. And so I think that's some people use a very discriminatory and kind of prejudiced towards one lifestyle definition of through hiking, where they say it's backpacking. There are people in this world and continents in this world where backpacks are not the main form of transport for long distances, and so it's discriminatory. And so to be more inclusive, so it's not just backpacks, I would say. So things, other forms would be like saddlebags, so you could carry things in saddlebags. So like if you take a horse or you're transporting something, so like equestrian trips if your horse comes with you, or sleds. So especially in Arctic climates, backpacks are no longer a smart, logical, or realistic choice, and sleds become a far more good choice kind of thing, a far more logical option. So yeah, so that's kind of how I view through hiking is from a hiker standpoint, it's hiking a long trail. So like, some people call through hikes that are like 9 miles or 13 miles. So it highly depends on the person. I would say it's having I am through hiking this trail kind of mentality, and primarily on foot, though you can get rides and stuff like that. Like maybe you choose to do the entire trail on horseback. That's still a through hike. The horse is the one walking, or the car is the one walking, so to speak. And then it doesn't have to be, and you carry your supplies with you. And that can be in like a backpack, saddlebags, on your head, or with sleds. So like gourds. That is common still in rural Africa. It's gourds, especially food and water. So this is a more inclusive definition of through hiking than a lot of the ones I've come across where they restrict it only to backpacks. Backpacking can be super broad, and it's a far more diverse field than through hiking. So I would very loosely describe, for like, this is my own kind of perspective. Again, this is a spontaneous video, so this isn't like, this is just me musing out loud. I would call this living out of a backpack. And I kind of like this phrasing because living out of a backpack, so some people backpack Europe, or backpack Africa, or backpack Asia, or backpack Australia, or backpack New Zealand, and stuff like that. And so to be backpacking, it's living out of a backpack. And so I guess I did that in Scotland. I don't know if I would describe it as backpacking. I think for me, backpacking still is kind of, I envision it as being like out on a trail and hiking or walking a bunch of miles, and then kind of my stuff is stored in a bag, and then I might camp in a tent or something like that. But that's just, I think, one form of backpacking. Well, I know it's one form of backpacking because this is the more inclusive term, and so it's just yeah. So I don't know for myself if I would use backpacking. It is true. And with this definition, I did backpack Scotland. I did hikes, but my main method of transportation was car, not hiking. So it's just yeah. So I don't know if I'm gonna do a backpack in Ireland or not. I checked my backpack because I took a tent, and tent poles cannot be carried onto airplanes anymore. They used to be able to, but now they need to be checked. Or at least when I went to Scotland in July 2019, they needed to be checked. So I had to check my tent that way. So I don't know, my bag's starting to tear a little bit. It's pretty old. I had it when I went to Africa. I took one suitcase and one backpack for almost 6 months of living in South Africa. Yeah. And so I don't know. I think my understanding of backpacking has increased as increased but broadened, I would say. It's a far broader and more inclusive to people who have different physical abilities than through hiking. And it's still, I would say, backpacking, living out of a backpack, and there might be like a traveling component to it. So I like that. Okay, I think I got it. This is like my understanding of backpacking that sits well. It's living out of a backpack and traveling. So in that case, I did backpack Scotland because I lived out of a backpack, and then there can be different degrees of like intensity. So if you're walking from hotel to hotel or walking from campsite to campsite, those are two additional forms of backpacking. I like this one. So in traveling, so and you could still, like, some people will spend multiple nights at one place when they're through hiking. Doesn't mean they're actually moving forward. Sometimes we stay in one place, and that happens with backpacking too. But I guess it's not like where I'm living, so if I have a house or an apartment or something like that, and then I go to Ireland or I go to Scotland and I'm traveling all around the country and living out of a backpack, that's still the backpack thing. I don't know. This is just me musing. So yeah, in the backpacking thing. So I guess thinking forward, let's say I chose to hike the Pacific Crest Trail or the Northwest Trail or the Appalachian Trail or the Continental Divide Trail. Those are long trails. So let's choose something more reasonable as a first through hike. Solo through hike. I've done a group through hike. I have not done a solo through hike. And solo through hike, I mean going on my own. There's a trail in Washington State called the Boundary Trail, which sounds pretty cool. It's about 80 miles one way. So I guess I could be picked up or dropped off and picked up if I could convince my parents to do that kind of thing. So I have that one on my radar, but would I call it through hiking? I think there's a culture around through hiking that can, it's not always it's not always a healthy mentality. So I would actually, for my first through hike, I can still call it a through hike, but my approach might be backpacking. And I might instead call it a backpacking trip, even though to some it might be viewed as a through hike. I don't know. We used the term through hiking because that was definitely the dominant mode of thinking when I went on my first through hike. There were 5 of us. But the term backpacking is definitely growing on me. So a 3,000 mile on foot backpacking trip is a heck of a lot more badass than a 3,000 mile through hike. Just, I don't, it like, when I hear that, I'm like, the backpacking option is kind of, but that's just my personal, like when I hear it, it's more impressive to me than through hiking. But then I use through hiking to describe myself. I don't know. And backpacking is like, there's the living out of a backpack versus, might not, I don't know. Working on it.